A few years ago, slimline digital pianos suddenly became quite popular, and Roland and Yamaha both came out with examples. The F701 has become Roland's most popular selling digital piano over the last several years. But at NAMM 2024, Casio released their new AP series, which included this, the APS 450, their version of the slimline digital piano. So as we put it back to back with the current reigning champ, we're gonna find out how it stacks up, how the speakers perform, how the sounds compare, how the user experiences, and of course we're gonna do some playing and share my musical opinion of both these instruments. So let's begin with the Casio and the three things that I really appreciate about this instrument. First of all, somehow they have managed to get the form factor on this even slimmer than what Roland has done here on the F701. It's slightly less deep, but for those who still want a bit of a vertical look, they've really done an interesting job of adding some height here that has an acoustic purpose. Because unlike the Roland that uses a two-speaker system, the Casio actually has two tweeters that are hidden in this upper cabinet. In addition, the lower speakers are actually facing up into the cabinet, so this whole thing is acting as a resonating chamber. What's more, they've added this high gloss strip to the front, which on its own gives it an interesting aesthetic look, almost a bit of a reminder of what a real grand piano or upright piano looks like with a high gloss finish. And then they've embedded that visualizer bar, which kind of is what it sounds like. It is pretty well just visualizes the music that's going on the instrument at any given time. That could be triggered by your own playing or inbound Bluetooth audio. So overall, the cabinet design, I would say, is a win for Casio. The second thing that I've really been appreciating about this whole AP series, and this is present on the APS 450 as well, is that updated Hamburg Steinway sample. Even without knowing what used to be the original Hamburg sample, the new one gives you a lot to appreciate. It sounds like there are more sample layers in there. It also sounds much more dynamic. And in addition, Casio has moved to a lossless sample technology. So the tones are super clear, particularly when you're using a good set of headphones and you're up in the upper register. All those cabinet resonances and string resonance are crystal clear. So in terms of the overall sample fidelity and just the output signal quality, this is really right up there in the industry. And if we're looking for areas that might actually edge out the Roland, just the pure fidelity of that signal is probably one of them. And then the third is the piano action itself. Now, I tend to prefer heavier feeling actions because I've come from an acoustic background and I spend a lot of my time hammering away on old acoustic pianos for hours on end. And so my fingers are used to a heavier action and I tend to appreciate that in terms of getting a response out of the instrument. However, I'm in the minority. Most people who are going to be interacting with digital pianos are either not as familiar with an acoustic piano touch, or B, is familiar with an acoustic piano touch, but is probably going to be playing the piano on the softer side of things. Either way, the sensation they're probably going to prefer at the keys is maybe on the lighter or medium side, whereas with the Roland, it's a little on the medium to the heavy side. And to that end, this is definitely the most satisfying mid-range Casio action that I've played. Their GP510 has a lot to love, but aside from that, this is really well executed. It's mechanically quiet. The key bed has that nice middle ground in terms of firmness and cushiness. And overall, the feel is precise and crisp. Now let's move over to the Roland and the three things that I really love about the F701. And the number one thing for me has to be the speaker performance. I think this is probably one of the things that made this instrument so popular because next to other instruments in its price range, the bass feels incredibly full, and overall the sound has a really nice punch to it, whether you're playing an acoustic piano or an e-piano or even something like a stand-up bass. Now, because this is an instrument where the speakers are facing down, you're going to have a very different experience playing the F701, whether it's on a rug or carpet versus tile or hardwood. So some of that punch I'm talking about might be slightly muted or attenuated if you're on a softer surface. Whereas the Casio isn't going to be nearly as affected by the surface it's sitting on because of the configuration of the speakers. That extra bass presence that the Roland gives is going to have some nice satisfying lower octaves and generally a very lively experience overall. Second thing I'm going to mention here is the user interface. Now, this was updated along with the RP701 and borrows a few elements that you saw on the upper HP and LX series. But really, the 701s have their own thing going on. Now, what I like about it is even without the use of an app, you're able to quickly and easily navigate to the most complex parts of the instrument with a very intuitive OLED display, and some very cool illumination around the buttons. It's sort of a nice halfway point between the buttonless era that we seem to be moving into with all instruments versus the older era where there were tons of buttons that really kind of clunkied up the visual experience of playing the piano. The one thing that I would love to change about it, I'm not a fan of button volume control. It's a small thing, but I'm still sort of a slider or a knob guy when it comes to that. But besides that, this is definitely one of the most compact yet most feature-rich user interfaces that I've seen anywhere in the piano business. Now the third thing is definitely the sheer quantity of sounds that Roland makes available here. Now granted, a good chunk of that 300 plus sounds are from the general MIDI 2 sound bank, so the fidelity and overall richness of some of those sounds is going to sound a little limited compared to its headliner sounds, but they are there and available to access. But even the main category sounds here are plentiful, and there isn't a bad one in the batch. You've got lots of very, very round, rich sounding E-pianos, strings, pads, and an impressive selection of acoustic pianos as well, including a great upright piano Supernatural engine. So let's do a little playing now. I'm going to start with the Casio and move on to the Roland, and we're going to sample their flagship acoustic piano tones. That was the Hamburg. Now let's have a listen to their New York sample. The second tone I'm going to sample here is their ballad piano, which on this series of Roland happens to be my favorite secondary acoustic piano tone. Both of these instruments are equipped with both Bluetooth audio and MIDI. Both have companion apps available from the manufacturer. And like the Casio, the Roland is also available in multiple colors. The white you're seeing here, a charcoal black, as well as a stunning light oak finish. So here are my final thoughts of these instruments. Casio's priority on producing a really warm mid-range as well as a lot of high-end detail actually makes this instrument an incredibly nuanced and responsive instrument to play. And while their focus hasn't been as much on producing a big boomy bass, there is plenty of body through the lower mid right through the upper ranges of the instrument. So that leads me to think that the Casio is actually going to be really quite appealing to beginner players who are going to be doing the majority of their playing in the mid-range of the instrument, as well as I would say some light to medium level classical players who are also going to be spending the majority of time in this range and really listening to a lot of complex harmonies and sort of inner voicing and things like that. Over on the Roland, and as I mentioned earlier in the video, I think this is going to appeal a lot to contemporary players for several reasons. One, people who are a little more used to kind of a V shape from an EQ standpoint in the sound. The Roland is already by default EQ'd in that way, and that's definitely the presentation you get sitting at the instrument. It's got a bit more of a punchy bass to it than the Casio gives you, and the slightly heavier key touch is going to be very conducive to either somebody with a ton of acoustic piano playing experience prior, or those who really enjoy the feeling of punching into an action and feeling some robustness there. And otherwise, we hope that you found this video to be helpful and hopefully a little entertaining. If you liked it, please consider subscribing and joining our community of piano lovers from all over the world. It's an amazing group of people. My name is Stu Harrison. This, of course, has been Miriam Pianos on YouTube, and we'll see you again soon.